Welcome to the Bootstrap Digital Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Tate. And today we have the pleasure of being joined by Jeff Greenfield, the co-founder and CEO of Probalytics, a leading marketing analytics firm. Today's topic of discussion is navigating attribution models in a cookieless world. We'll explore the various attribution models such as first touch, last touch, multi-touch, and how they influence campaign analysis. And we'll also explore how the upcoming cookieless world will impact campaigns. Jeff, let's talk about you first a little bit. Can you share your background and how you became interested in marketing analytics and attribution modeling?
I don't think anyone gets interested in this because from the outside, it doesn't seem very sexy. But once you get on the inside, it is, because you're in the middle of everything that's going on across all of these different campaigns. The sexy part of marketing analytics is you get to see kind of the inside baseball on what happens, not only in digital, but also in traditional campaigns. I came about this because I came up with a problem. It was the mid-2000s. I had a client I was buying media for, spending well over $1 million a month, which back then was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money today, but back in mid-2000s, it was a lot. And the numbers just didn't add up. It seemed like for every sale, there were 5 or 6 different partners taking credit. We had this issue, which is very common in digital marketing, where they're kind of siloed. So they don't know who gets credit. So obviously they want to take credit. And it's this problem where for every sale, you have like 5 mothers or 5 fathers. They're all claiming, that's my child. And so that led me to create a platform, which was one of the first multi-touch attribution platforms, C3 Metrics, and build that out to solve mainly that deduplication problem so that we could actually come down and say, okay, this is the actual parent of this sale. And then that led to the concept of saying, well, maybe we should split up the credit. We don't want to give all the credit to the last one or all the credit to the first touch. We came up with an algorithm that split the credit up. And that's where things started to get exciting, because then at that point, we would actually know where to spend more and where to spend less in order to drive more sales, drive more leads. I scaled up that company, exited there in 2019, thinking I would never, ever go back to measurement. I spent 12 years at it. And then after taking a couple of years off, the bottom dropped out of the ad tech industry. Overnight, we had this concept of walled gardens. All of a sudden, there were tons of platforms that could say, you can put data in, but you can't get it out, like the Facebooks of the world, the Walmarts and the Amazons. And then we had the iOS craziness that went on that started blocking stuff, and you couldn't get data anymore on mobile Safari, which people definitely want to target and measure. And then the biggest one is this cookie collapse. We've had kind of starts and stops on, but it is coming. Third-party cookies are going to be removed. The whole concept behind multi-touch attribution was to connect the entire digital trail, both impressions and clicks. If we can't do that anymore, we have a problem, which means we're only looking at clicks and we can't produce a good attribution model around that. So I created this new company called Probalytics, which has a totally different approach. It kind of pans the camera back to look at things from the broader, bigger perspective, but is also able to dial into the details. So it lives in between marketing mix modeling and multi-touch attribution. It is sexy to be in it now. I never chose to get into this space, but for those folks who are listening who like to be in the middle of things, attribution and analytics, you're definitely in the middle of things.
For my listeners who don't know, before getting to the cookie collapse, can you explain the differences between first touch, last touch, and multi-touch attribution?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with last touch because that's the most prevalent and that's primarily what's driving most of measurement today. I would say that probably 99.9% of marketers are using last touch attribution. And last touch is simply giving credit to the last clicked ad. So whatever the user did when they clicked right before they purchased or right before they filled out the lead form, that would be last touch attribution. That's typically what you get with GA and GA4, Adobe, and any of those things. And the reason that became so popular is that you kind of have to go back to before digital. So like 2003, 2004, we would plan out these campaigns, do TV, out of home, print, radio.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would spend a lot of time on the creative, launch the campaign, and then we would sit back. There were no dials to turn. There was nothing to look at. There was nothing to log into. And we'd kind of wait. And we'd have to wait at least 3 or 6 months before we could do post campaign surveys to see the effectiveness of it. And then all of a sudden, when digital came out, it was really cool because digital tracked clicks and you could actually see the last click that was leading. So as a marketer, I can spend money and at the end of the month, I can get a report that shows what I got. That's so much better. So that's what kind of drove the adoption, is that I could prove the dollars I spent actually had an impact. Now, the reality was at that time, nobody was combining traditional and digital together. So whether they had an incremental impact is highly unlikely, meaning that those sales would have probably occurred anyway. We really don't know. But last click is giving credit to the last touch, the last thing that happened. It's kind of, I guess the best way to look at it is that when you go to the supermarket and you're in the checkout line and there's that package of Tic Tacs right there and you grab them, that's like giving credit to the checkout person for you buying those Tic Tacs.
Or the positioning of the stand right there in front of you.
That's right. Yeah. So that's last click. Now, a lot of folks said, well, the problem is my journey, the time frame that people are in, that it takes them from awareness through to consideration of purchase is greater than 30 days. And I know that from, let's say, market research.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give credit to the last touch. I want to give credit to the first touch, to the first thing that they clicked, or the first impression, the first ad that they were exposed to. And a lot of brands switched from last to first. And that makes sense if you have a long journey, because really your goal at that point is you want to get more people into the funnel and fill that funnel up, because you know that journey is going to take 30 or 60 or 90 days. When we think about the automobile industry, that's a 9-month cycle. So you don't want to be last touch there. You definitely want to be first touch. And that's where multi-touch came out, because the reality is, if I have a 9-month journey and I spend all my money at first touch, I'm going to be driving a lot of awareness at the top of the funnel. But when people are at the bottom of the funnel, my competitors can go in and just grab them. So I need to be at the top, the middle, and the bottom of the funnel. I need to have an overall awareness of what's going on and a methodology so that I can buy across the whole funnel. And that's multi-touch. Multi-touch is more of an algorithmic approach where you're giving credit based upon its actual contribution. And different platforms have different algorithms. The nice thing is, with an algorithmic approach and with all these approaches, you can validate to see how well these models actually predict. And that's really what you want to do. You want to find a model and approach, whether it's last touch, first touch, or multi-touch, that actually predicts your success or failure. Because that way, if you find something that is predicting, let's say 80% of the time, well, you can bet on that and you should trust that model. And that's really the key with these approaches.
Or now that our listeners know a bit about what first touch, last touch, multi-touch means, let's back up to the cookie collapse, or as you said, the cookie apocalypse. I had a question about that too. You talk a little bit about what it means for those who don't know what cookies are. They haven't been paying attention. They just notice that there's all these screens popping up on your browsers to accept all these marketing permissions. Can you explain what cookies are quickly, and also what is this impending apocalypse?
Yeah, absolutely. So cookies, it's only those of us in the ad tech world that nerd out on this stuff. But the truth is, we all know about cookies. Anytime you go to your browser and you go to Amazon and you're automatically logged in, or you go to New York Times and you're automatically logged in, those are cookies. It's a little piece of code on your browser that they save there, and they know who you are. You've authenticated before, and that's saved in a cookie. And that's called a first-party cookie. It's something that only Amazon can read and know about you.
They know who you are. Now, that can sound scary to people. What do they know?
Well, in the case of first-party cookies, they only know what you've given them. That's why those banners come up, because you're saying, hey, I agree to accept your terms and conditions and your privacy things. Essentially, all they put in your browser is a little tiny piece of code that is encrypted. When you show up to the site, it looks for that code. If that's there, then it looks up on their side what that ID means, and it automatically logs you in. So it creates a seamless experience on the web, which is great. It's kind of a way for you to save preferences and things like that. First-party cookies are also used by advertisers. They use them when you go to the website and you go to make a purchase. When you come back in and you log in, or you're automatically logged in, they know about you because you've shared that information with them. They know what you've purchased in the past. It makes your life on the web so much easier. This cookie collapse is around a different set of cookies. The different set of cookies are called third-party cookies. These are cookies when you go to, let's say, the New York Times, and you see an ad there for your local automobile dealer. Let's say it's a Ford dealership. And they are setting a cookie so that they know that you saw that ad. Now, why would they do that? Well, so that when you go to the Wall Street Journal and you've already been on 5 pages of the New York Times and you've already seen that ad 5 times, it would probably be really irritating if you saw it on every single page you went to. That's not a very positive experience. So cookies, third-party cookies, help with what we call frequency caps to make sure you don't get exposed too many times. Third-party cookies also help with measurement. So we're able to tell which ads you were exposed to, so we can do an analysis in aggregate to see what ads are actually working, which ones aren't working. Third-party cookies are used to create targeting segments so that if you're on a certain website and you're reading certain articles, there's vendors out there that are saying, oh, they're reading an article, let's say, on cigars. And then you go to another website and you're reading an article about SUVs. So now you're going to be added to a segment of people who live in whatever area of the US you live in, who like SUVs and smoke cigars. Maybe 2 or 3 months later, you're going to start seeing a bunch of ads for cigars and SUVs, even though you haven't been shopping for them, but you've been reading about them. And that's some of the craziness around third-party cookies. The other aspect is that when you're shopping, let's say at a Nordstrom.com, and you're scrolling through and looking for shoes, you didn't buy anything, and then you go to your Facebook feed and the same shoes show up there. That's called behavioral retargeting. That's also primarily through third-party cookies. It enables outside vendors and ad vendors to connect you across different websites so that they can measure and create targeted segments for advertisers so that they can show you what they think would be relevant for you. Safari, which is the browser for Apple's devices, Firefox doesn't have third-party cookies. And the big cookie collapse, the big cookie apocalypse is at Chrome, which is the most prevalent browser worldwide, is going to get rid of third-party cookies. Now, they have started that discussion. They've said that it's going to happen, and they've stopped it several times. It was supposed to happen this year, like in Q3, but it's now going to happen next year.
They're pushing it off, pushing it off. They're not ready yet. Nobody's ready. So for advertisers and marketers, having cookies is like heaven sent, to be able to do this fine-tuned tracking and to really serve up ads that are relevant to their target audience, to find them where they are. So now they'll be going away next year. So what are marketers and advertisers going to do? How do you see these attribution models evolving to adapt to this new environment and continue providing valuable insight?
Yeah, that's the big question, because with this cookie collapse, it changes how marketers are going to target, which means they have to measure differently. So we talked before about this concept of multi-touch attribution, where we collect every single impression and every single click, and we put it all together in machine learning to figure out what's working and what's not working. We're not going to have that data anymore. So we have to pan the camera back a bit and use a broader perspective. And we're going to use now math and statistics to figure out what's working and what's not working. So we're going to borrow from what we used before digital was around, which was the world of marketing mix modeling. But the problem with marketing mix modeling is that it was always a project. It was a heavy lift, a lot of work, and the output was a PowerPoint presentation, which wasn't much help for digital marketers because it didn't give us the granularity. I need to know not what channel, but I need to know campaign, ad group, keyword, maybe even match type, so that I know how to optimize my campaign. So what we've done is we've kind of filled the void between marketing mix modeling and multi-touch attribution to live in that middle ground where our platform hands that camera back, uses very advanced math, machine learning, and AI, but also provides the same level of granularity that marketers are used to with multi-touch attribution.
So how can marketers and businesses who are advertising leverage non-cookie based methodologies and technologies to track and attribute conversions across the various touch points in a customer's journey?
Well, most marketers and advertisers spending heavily in the digital world probably have a Google Sheet. That Google Sheet has every single day of the year where they've spent dollars, how much they spent, how many clicks they had, how many sales or leads they had, their click-through rate, cost per click, cost per sale, all of that. What we need to understand is that advertising has an effect that's immediate when it's running, but then there's a longer-term impact. Sometimes you run an ad and there's no impact, yet a week or two later, you get a lift from sales. That's the result of impressions. The first thing that advertisers need to understand is that when you're buying ads, you're not buying clicks. Clicks are the result of the ad, but really what you're buying are eyeballs. And you can measure how many eyeballs. When you log into the platforms, you see how many impressions you purchased. So what I would urge all marketers to do is add another tab or another column, if you will, in that Google Sheet, title it impressions, and go back for the last year and add up how many impressions they had in market every single day. What they'll start to see is a relationship between impressions and sales, not on the same day, but it's more like a long-term thing. Maybe there's a lag of 3 to 5 days, but there will be a lag. That's the first thing that all marketers should do, is to start realizing their dollars are buying eyeballs. You're buying reach. And you want to focus on that versus the clicks. The clicks will come if the ads are building the proper awareness. But you really want to make sure you're measuring that first thing, which are the impressions that you're buying.
And then when you do get the clicks, track exactly where they're coming from. For instance, you've got a product website selling makeup, and the granular tracking on a web page. In this privacy, you mentioned on your website that every state is coming up with their own state privacy laws, and some are more extreme than others. With the granular tracking on websites, how is that going, this cookie list, we're going to impact that and all the privacy laws?
Luckily, when someone gets to your website, you've got those cookie banners that are up. And now they're entering your realm. That's like somebody who walks into your store. So somebody walks into your store and you say, hey, would you like to sign up for our newsletter? Would you like to sign up for our text notification? When you walk into retail stores, they give you an offer. Hey, would you like to get a 5% coupon off today's purchase? Fill this out. And there's terms and conditions that go with that. The same thing happens when you go to any website these days that's selling makeup, let's say. There's a pop-up that says, would you like to get 10% off today? Put your email address in here. There's a link to terms and conditions that say, we're going to use this to reach out to you, to market to you. So there's that permission. When you go to the store, you're giving permission when you check that box. As long as you have an opportunity for someone to check the box, stores, vendors, and marketers can start collecting that first-party data, which goes along with the concept of first-party cookies. Stores are starting to collect information on you, that first-party data, as soon as you get there, as long as you give permission. Where the difficulty is, as a marketer, is that as cookies are going away, if you found out about me from reading an article on the New York Times and there happened to be an ad that was there, and you didn't click on that ad, but you just came to my store directly 2 or 3 days later, I'm not going to know that you were exposed to that ad. So unless I start making changes in the way I measure the effectiveness of my ads, I won't know to keep buying those ads on the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just keep buying stuff that's lower down at the bottom. And that's not good because that's not going to help me grow my business.
Mm-hmm. So how or what new technologies or data sources do you recommend for marketers to improve their attribution modeling efforts?
First off, we're not going to have the availability of that user level data.
It's gone forever.
So this concept of being able to like look at, you're going to know the journey as soon as they come to your website and give you information. You'll know every single product they looked at. You'll know how they got to the website, what that last click was. But in terms of what got them there in the first place, whatever built that awareness, you're not going to know that the way we used to know in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have to pan back the camera and we have to use advanced statistics and mathematics in order to do it. At Probalytics, it's interesting because we look at it as back to the future. We're now back to the way things used to be before digital, where you could only measure at very broad strokes, but we've advanced it. But what's fascinating is we're using very old school techniques. We're using a technique called Bayesian. Bayesian is driving a lot of the AI revolution that's going on because Bayesian acts and thinks the same way that human beings do. And the best way to look at it is when human beings, when we're asked a question that we don't know the answer to, we take all of the information that we have in our brain and make our best guess. And Bayesian is essentially a computer's way to make a best guess. What's fascinating is that Bayesian was developed in the 1700s. It's a mathematical formula. The other technique we use is from the 1960s out of the University of Chicago, a very advanced mathematical technique called seemingly unrelated regressions. A lot of folks may have heard, if they ever took a statistics class in college, about regression modeling. This is like regression modeling on steroids. And being able to use both of these techniques in combination with the advanced computing power allows us to do stuff that would have normally taken 7 or 8 months to compute. We can do it in several hours. It's unbelievable how fast computers and machines have come. It's just absolutely incredible. Platforms like ours at Probalytics are able to take in all of this data that is not user level and send out results back to the marketer that tell them where to spend more and where to spend less in order to drive more sales, drive more leads, get more of whatever it is that you need to get. Whatever it is your marketing is supposed to do, that's what these techniques do. There's that old adage about marketing that says half the money I spend is wasted. The only problem is I don't know which half. And so that's what happens with a lot of marketers is that you end up doing some of the same things that everyone always did because you don't, maybe this is the thing that's driving sales. You don't know. Well, using these techniques, we actually know we can prove it by doing validation and proving it out. And so you'll know which half was wasted. You'll be able to take that half of your marketing and redeploy it towards stuff that's working. So the greatest thing is be able to take the same budget and squeeze out more sales, leads, or conversions. It's pretty exciting time for marketers. It's scary though, because things are going to be different.
Yeah.
Nobody likes change. We definitely don't like change.
We've had it kind of easy with all this data available. Can you give an example, a customer case study or use case where you're using these new I can't say the word methodologies?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a client that is a multi-billion-dollar retailer. So that's out there across very prevalent in Amazon and online and physical stores that spend several $100 million a year in marketing. What's happened before we came on board is that they measure most of their media using Google Analytics. As a result, they've heavily invested and overinvested in search. That's where most of their marketing dollars are spent in paid search. A new CMO came on board and said, I want to test out new stuff that we haven't done here in a long time, like things like CTV and podcast advertising. So they did some testing of it and it looked like it worked, but the chief financial officer said, you can't really deploy that much money to there because I'm looking in Google Analytics and I'm seeing that most of the impact is coming from brand search and paid search. So it doesn't seem like it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So we came on board and went back and analyzed the last 18 months of performance for them. And we were able to demonstrate to the CFO and to the CMO is that they had way overinvested in paid search. And what that meant is that what Google was showing them that their return on ad spend was not the correct number at all. The return on ad spend for paid search was much less. We showed that the value from that CTV test they did was much greater than they thought. The result was that they were able to redeploy money that was already being spent in search and move it more towards the upper part of the funnel in CTV, move it also towards more paid social campaigns that were not performing well in Google Analytics. And the end result for them was an incremental $15 million in sales for them. So pretty substantial for a very small invested. And they continue to redeploy, and the budget continues to start to grow for that upper part of the funnel. Because what they're finding is as they spend more money in the upper funnel, they're getting more eyeballs, the reach is expanding, and sales are flowing through. Now their mix is in a much better place than it was before.
When you say that, it makes me think of traditional advertising, publishing a print ad in a magazine. You get all the eyeballs because it has a certain number of circulation.
Well, that's exactly
going forwards.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's all about eyeballs. The difficulty today, though, is that most people's eyeballs were so exposed to so many things so fast when you start to think about the TikTok style ads, the really fast ads, people's attention spans have been getting less and less. And what we're finding now across all of our clients is the ads that seem to be working the best, and this is not going to be any surprise, are the ones that are telling a story.
Yeah.
It's all about creating an emotional bond with the consumer. And the brands that are taking the time to do the proper research, to come up with the proper messaging, those are the ones that are killing it these days. And the reality is, it doesn't matter where you advertise, but 75% of the effectiveness of all ad campaigns are from the messaging and from the creative.
Absolutely. I tell my clients all the time is they have got to tell a story that develops, like you said, that bond captures their attention. Why don't you talk a little bit about the privacy issues we're facing as marketers and businesses and how we collect the data? Like when you visit a website and you've got to get consent from the consumer. We know that in Europe it's much more strict. But what's happening here in the United States? I think California has more strict privacy laws than other states. So how can marketers and businesses adapt to all these privacy law changes?
Well, it's a lot of work. Unfortunately, it used to be a marketer to sell stuff. You just put up a website, and the hardest thing was getting the credit card system working so people can buy stuff and you can get paid. Now you have to be a lawyer as well or try to find out what's going on with this stuff.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult. And as you mentioned, Laura, this all started in the EU, over in Europe, with the GDPR, as they called it. That's very strict. It says that for any marketers, like if you have a list of customers, you no longer have that list. You have to go back to all of them and ask them to join again. In the US, it first started in California with the CCPA. Customers need to be able to say, take me off your list. Show me all the information you have about me, and I can say either delete it all or I can ask you to change some of it. What's happened now is that you've got laws in Nevada and Maryland. Every state is starting to come up with their own law, and that makes it almost impossible for marketers to figure out what's going on. We have some hope that maybe there will be an overarching federal law similar to what they did for email with spam will make it easier for marketers to comply. There are a couple of areas that certain marketers need to be really cautious about. Those that are in healthcare or healthcare related places. So I would say, like, if you have any type of site where someone would communicate with a doctor or prescription sites, even some nutritional products as well, There's been some warning letters from the FTC
Mhm.
about having Facebook's pixel on your website.
Mm.
When someone is filling out information, where does that data go to? And what are those other people doing with that data? And you can
Mhm.
say, well, I need Facebook to buy ads. So how can I build a business? That's true, but it's just something you need to be aware of. There was also last year some state lawsuits, some class action lawsuits that
Mhm.
revolved around video, because there's a lot of websites that what they do is in order to improve how someone can circumvent the website and make their way through the shopping cart, there's companies out there that through job actually have a video trail that show exactly what you're doing and where your mouse is at. And some smart lawyers, or we can say some pain lawyers, came up with this concept of saying, hey, there's video laws in this state, and you didn't give permission for people to be videotaped, essentially. Some of those lawsuits went away, some of them are progressing forward, but you need to look into areas on how to protect yourself in terms of that. A lot of the internet organizations for merchants and vendors will give you information on what things you need to add to your terms of use and your
Mhm.
privacy policies. You always need to make sure that those are up to date so that you don't get into trouble.
Mhm.
There's also the ADA. You need to
Mhm.
make certain that your website is accessible for people who have hearing difficulties, who can't
Mhm.
see, so they use these screen readers and things like that. A lot of websites are not compliant with it. A lot of times, especially restaurants and certain organizations, the lawyers will start to come after them. There's companies that provide ADA compliant, they're just plugins. You add it to your website and it's all set.
Mhm.
I believe Spotify has it built in, but you just always need to be one step ahead. What I always recommend to marketers is you take some time every month and read up on what's happening in your space.
Yeah.
You never want to get a letter that surprises you.
Luckily, a lot of the website builders offer tools to be compliant. I was thinking about WordPress when we were talking about the data, about how consumers have the right to update their data or ask you to remove it or part of it and so on. And WordPress, I know, offers these capabilities with some plugins, Shopify and others. Yeah, and then maybe it's also a good idea to have a lawyer review your terms of service, your privacy policy, and so on, and not just go and grab a template off the place from
Definitely not.
yeah. You touched on this a little bit, the impact of AI and machine learning and attribution modeling. Can you talk more about the advancements of AI and machine learning and how these technologies will impact attribution modeling in the future and help marketers gain a deeper understanding of their customer journey?
So most people, their understanding of AI these days is like ChatGPT. You can
Mhm.
go in and talk to it and ask it questions, and it responds to you. In fact, ChatGPT now has a voice too. It can talk to you in a voice, and it's very exciting where it is. The marketing aspect of the AI is not yet like a ChatGPT. And I think one of the reasons for that is when you start to think about the output of marketing data that you get, especially from our platform, the number of questions you could ask is just ridiculous.
Mhm.
It's what we find for our clients is the number of reports and the different visualizations we could provide with this data and the output. It's a little overwhelming. And so sometimes it's kind of like the advantage of a catalog, the old school catalogs. I think
Mhm.
catalogs are actually going to come back because the catalog is like a curated experience. It's like we have 10,000 products, but we're going to cut it down to the top 20 that we
Mhm.
think you would like based upon what we know about you. And so that's what we do at Probalytics is we curate it down so that we don't overwhelm marketers too much. The AI aspect is not in asking questions, it's more how it runs. With the level of machine learning that we're doing, we're combining a lot of different aspects together.
Mhm.
And traditionally, what would happen is that there would be a lot of start and stops where the system would first do its analysis, it would stop. A human being would then analyze it, do some kind of shaving of the data, shaping of it, and then turn it over to the next process. And that would go through a series of steps and maybe a series of 10 or 15 people. What we've done is we've trained our AI to handle those intermediate steps So there doesn't have to be human intervention. Humans aren't necessary to go in and check the data all throughout and take it from step A to step B to step C, because step B and C normally don't talk to each other, but we use this AI process to bridge that gap for us. And that's what's really cool. So what it allows us to do is significantly speed up the process.
Yeah.
And the only human intervention is in the beginning. We still do a human QA process where we're checking the data that's going into the model. The platform expects the data to be a certain way. So we need to make certain that it's exactly that way. And what we find is that even though we're getting this data from other platforms and it should be perfect, we find every week that there's mistakes and problems. It always happens. There's something about having human beings check the data at the beginning and at the end of the process.
Yeah.
But we let the machines handle it in the middle. And that's where our AI is involved.
I experience the same thing with content marketing and using AI, is making sure the data in the beginning is accurate, and at the end, double checking and making sure that it understood the data and output it correctly. Absolutely. Human oversight, hopefully, will always be needed, right?
I think that AI is starting to appear more human-like. It's doing a very good job of copying things, but to be able to create, and I've seen some of the creations, some of the art, it's absolutely beautiful, but it's still being prompted by a human. And I could see where eventually AI will be able to prompt itself, but there's still something, this human aspect of creativity. When you talk to artists and they're painting a canvas, most of them, when you talk to them about where that creation comes from, it's something that was sent to them, that they got a message in their brain, and all they're doing is their best to copy what that picture is inside their brain, that they have inside their mind. I don't think AI is ever going to get to that point. There's something unique about being human.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice can you give to businesses and marketers who are just starting to navigate this terrain? Maybe they're just starting launching a business and they're having, okay, how do we track what we're doing? And then, or maybe they've been at it a while and they've been gotten used to all this data that they've collected and haven't had to worry about privacy laws and no cookies. What advice do you give to people who are just starting to navigate this terrain?
What I would say is that there's been a lot of changes, and we're right now at the beginning of this major paradigm in terms of how marketing and advertising is going to work for the next 20, 30 years. One of the best things you can do to understand where it's going next is to study history. History is a great revealer of what's coming, because when you start to look at the history of things, you start to see trends. I've been in this space long enough that I can start to see things. I know how things are going to kind of turn out. And so what we did at Probalytics is we put together an attribution certification course that goes through the history of advertising measurement and how we got to where we are today. And then it looks forward to the future. It provides for marketers and advertisers a solid foundation of understanding from which they can then move forward with. It's available at the website. There's no cost to it. It'll take you about an hour and a half to go through. There's a quiz at the end, and you get a great certificate to put on your LinkedIn as well. That's what I would suggest is the first step. Take a step back and look at, how did we get to where we are? Because that's going to give you your best understanding of where we're headed.
Very good. I'm going to check it out myself. Thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing your insights today. It's clear that the digital marketing landscape is changing quickly, and it's essential for businesses, marketers to be updated and be open to trying new approaches to attribution modeling. So for our listeners who want to learn more about Probalytics and your work, where can they find you?
The best place is to go to probalytics.com. You can also check me out on LinkedIn. I look forward to talking to anyone. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or at Probalytics.
All right, and sign up for your course too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the Bootstrap Digital Marketing Podcast for more episodes on the latest trends and strategies in digital marketing. And until then, keep innovating and optimizing. Thank you for listening to the Bootstrap Digital Marketing Podcast, where you can get practical tips and advice on marketing your business. Subscribe to get alerts about new episodes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please click like and share with your friends and colleagues. The Bootstrap Digital Marketing Podcast is produced by myself, Laura Tate, and Crackerjack Scribe.